Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard, brought to you by our sponsor, The Great Game of Business. I'm Lauren Feldman. I'm here with Shawn Busse to talk about the things we think business owners should be thinking about this week. Shawn is CEO and founder of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy. Welcome back to Dashboard, Shawn.
Hey, morning, Lauren.
Shawn, last week, you published a really interesting piece on LinkedIn arguing that business owners put a lot of time and energy into marketing that turns out to be kind of misguided. Can you give us an explanation of what you were getting at?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking, kind of specifically, sort of throwing things at the wall and hoping they would stick, and also just sort of years and years of observation of folks doing things like paying for digital, is kind of an umbrella term, which often means pay-per-click or lots of blog posts trying to optimize for SEO or, hiring a junior person to really take over a social media account and just kind of fire hose people with content. And, my point was that this is a lot like trench warfare, that essentially a lot of businesses are engaging in the same type of activity as their competition. And, it's becoming a matter of more and more money producing worse and worse results, and really trying to encourage people to look for other paths forward.
You talked a lot about friction, the idea that people are spending more, getting less in return. Give us an example of the kind of friction you were talking about.
I mean, there's a lot of examples here, right? So back in 2005, we were on the top of the world in terms of search engine optimization. You could type the term marketing in Portland or brand in Portland or web design in Portland, and Kinesis would be on page one at the very top. And that lasted for a good number of years. We were really good at that. And then over time, the kind of writing became on the wall in terms of, other businesses figured out this was important and they figured out how to do it. So you had that competitive force. But then I think the more important thing is that Google started pushing links to the top of the page that weren't people that were really good at SEO and doing organic work like we were. They were putting people at the top of the page that were paying them money. And at first, it was really innocuous, right? It might have been a link or two, and then it was 3 links, and they were highlighted in blue so you could see the difference. And then over time, became just the norm. And I think we've all seen this, where the quality of search has gotten kind of worse and worse and worse, because it's really become a place where you pay to play. And so if I were still engaged in that today, I would be spending an inordinate amount of money just to maintain some relevance in that space, way more than I did in the past, and getting probably worse and worse results, in part because now Google's become a toll booth. So you have the combination of everybody's doing it, and the tech platforms that own the data and the customers, they have a profit motive, right? And so they're driving everything towards more cost, higher cost. And I've seen this a lot too, with especially folks who are advertising on Facebook and, kind of in that space. There's a lot of complaints of like, God, it's gotten so expensive and I'm spending more and getting less.
Do you think this is equally true for companies that are selling to consumers versus companies that are selling to other businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I should caveat this with, my area of expertise is really in B2B. And that's a space where it tends to be more oriented towards strategy, lower numbers, higher value. And when these are generalizations, but if you're in the B2C space, you're generally talking higher numbers, lower value, small little changes are meaningful to you. And so I see that a lot of consumer brands, they really kind of have to play in this sort of digital trench warfare, at least to some degree. It's just, I see a lot of companies that A, maybe don't even need to at all, or B, because they're often working with companies that are sort of biased in this direction, they're not asking what else is possible. They're just sort of saying, well, I went to a seminar and my colleagues are doing digital marketing, and so I hired a digital agency. maybe that's not the right path. And what I see with B2B is there's a lot of room for more creativity and to be more interesting. And I think get better results.
So what else is possible? What are those other paths you're referring to?
I mean, I can give you a couple examples. I'll use one in the kind of consumer space. So I'll use a big company, even though this is a small business podcast. I'll use a big company because, it's something we all know. So I like Costco, great example of a business that, instead of focusing on, I talk on the piece about the 4 Ps of marketing, which is product, price, placement, and promotion. Most people see marketing as promotion, right? They're pushing really hard on ads, or SEO. Pay attention to me, pay attention to me. If you look at a company like Costco, they're actually thinking a lot about the product, also about the price. So for them, the product isn't the stuff in the stores. The product is the experience you have through membership. So they've fundamentally changed what the product was in comparison to their competition. And they've just gotten a huge benefit from doing that. And everybody else is kind of copying and following them, but doing a poor job of it. So they think a lot about membership. They really care about the customer because it's a membership business, not a retail box store business. And then they do things like make it easy to return things. They treat their employees well. And that creates kind of this virtuous cycle where people, they say to their friends, God, I love Costco. Why would I go anywhere else? It's a really good example of they could have gone to trench warfare and done like the Bed Bath & Beyond strategy, right? Like 20% off of everything all the time, bam, 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 just constantly advertising. But instead they said, let's change the product, and let's change how it's priced too, so you get people to pay for memberships as opposed to coming in the door for free. But then the things that they get when they come in the door are way different than everywhere else, and often much more affordable. So I just think that's a really good example of using strategy to change the product, to change the price, to not get caught in the trench warfare of trying to out advertise or, out digital the competition. So that's one of my favorite examples in the consumer space.
Do you have that example of a smaller business choosing one of those paths?
Yeah, I'll use an example. There's a small metal fabrication shop outside of Portland in McMinnville called Solid Form. So they weld things, right? They'll weld structural steel in a building. They'll weld ornamental things, put staircases together. And if Solid Form had engaged, the owner's name is Devin. If Devin had engaged in sort of traditional marketing as everybody is sort of being told to do it, digital, for example, he would have been told, well, you need keywords for things like welding and metal fabrication, blah, 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 and you need to buy those, or you need to do a bunch of blogs about what metal fabrication. Well, now he's fighting all the other firms that say the same thing, right? And in order to rise to the top, you have to spend more and more money or energy or time, right? So what he did that was really different is he was really passionate about the careers in the trades. And he started going into the high school and evangelizing this and talking about it. He started to go to networking events and acted as a speaker there. He started building affinity groups of people who were interested in the trades and recruiting kids out of high school to this career in the trades. And what's really interesting about that is that he's not talking about metal fabrication. He's talking about something that he's really passionate about, which is the opportunity for career advancement within the trades. And pretty soon he was finding other people who were interested in that too, which just so happened to be contractors and wineries and people who can actually buy his services. And so now they're aligning on something that they both care about. And he's not hammering them over the head with, well, buy my steel, or buy my fabrication services, which ends up, if you do that path, ends up being often on price. Instead, he's building relationships and he's, creating centers of influence, which are really powerful ways to get multiple customers in a strategic way, not this brute force, trench warfare. And, he's gone from 15 to 40 employees in the course of, 6 or 7 years. He's doing really well financially because now he has these deep relationships and people who hire him over and over again. It's not unlike the Costco model in that he kind of changed what the product was, and he de-emphasized the thing that he does to make money, which is steel fabrication, and he overemphasized a thing that was adjacent to that and really important, but that none of his competitors are really, at the time especially, were really talking about. And he became a leader in that area, and he became known as the guy to talk to about workforce development. So it's a really good example of a B2B strategy that was rooted in something he cared about and he believed in, and that was different from the rest of the market and didn't end up, he's not buying customers. He's actually building relationships. And I think that's a good example of a B2B approach or another small business approach. And that I would encourage people to think about when they want to get customers is, what are my other choices besides just buying or renting them through digital platforms?
That's a great example. I want to ask you about another marketing story that I highlighted in the morning report last week, and that involves Walmart. Walmart has decided it wants to sell its own premium line of food at its supermarkets. The line is called Better Goods. And it sounds to me like they're kind of trying to be all things to all people, which is something that we generally try to discourage, especially for smaller businesses. I'm just curious, do you think this can work for a behemoth like Walmart? They are the country's biggest grocer already. Or is this a mistake for them too, in your opinion?
So I'm just gonna say I'm no expert on grocery or retail.
Understood.
But I can speak to this through the lens of brand and positioning and messaging. And as a customer, I have seen Walmart for years anchor its brand and positioning as, we are here for the everyday person. Right? We're the brand you come to where you can find things that are affordable and kind of the meat and potatoes of your needs. And, you make some trade-offs with that, right? Like, I don't go to Walmart and say, gosh, I bet they treat their employees really well like Costco does, right? Like, I'm making a trade-off here of, I'm going to get something for low price. So they've got years of that brand heritage. And I just really question the ability to unwind that by simply offering a new product. Now, if you think back to Target a while back, like say in the maybe 90s or early 2000s, when people would jokingly say Target. Do you remember that, Lauren?
Sure.
They really went at, how do we become a place where people can get things that are designed thoughtfully. And they were successful at that, right? They hired Michael Graves. They hired all these other, pretty fancy product designers. But I think what was different about that is they were creating a new market that didn't exist before. And Target also, they had some brand equity of who they were and what they were about, but it wasn't that strong like Walmart's is. And so I just really question it from that perspective of brand transformation and change. It would be I read the Enquirer and then one day they say, hey, we're going to do New York Times level journalism. It's okay, come on, who's going to believe that? So I really questioned it in that perspective. And then the other thing that I've observed, which is really interesting, and maybe this is why they're doing it, is I'm watching brands like Whole Foods really become commoditized. If you go into Whole Foods now, instead of seeing all these, bespoke and boutique, small business brands and really kind of expensive and good things, there's all kinds of not Walmart, Whole Foods 365, their house brand stuff. And it seems like they're playing a price game. This is cheap. This is affordable. So it's really interesting. You've got Whole Foods going the other direction, right? It's trying to shed itself of that whole paycheck.
Which of course has happened since they were bought by Amazon.
They were bought by Amazon. Yeah. It's been more gradual there. So I think I think they might be quote unquote successful, and they're going to apply, Amazon like logistics to it, and so they'll really squeeze out all the like cost centers. I don't know. It just seems rather strange for Walmart to make this play. What do you think about it? What's your yeah.
Well, I was intrigued by the comparison you made with Target. The big difference that struck me is with Target, I think they were trying to kind of adopt the glow of other brands that they brought in. You mentioned Michael Graves, people who were established. I mean, not necessarily household names, but those who knew.
Yeah.
Whereas Walmart is doing something. They're playing with a little bit more fire, it seems to me, in that they're introducing their own line, Better Goods, that is intended to be upscale and going against the tide of what you described, years and years of being the place to go to get a good value. That seems like a bigger risk to me.
Do you think, this just hit me, do you think they're just doing a Me Too play for Trader Joe's?
I think that's very likely. I think if they're not thinking directly about them, they're thinking about Whole Foods. They're probably thinking about Costco a little bit too. They're so established. They've got they need to find
new customers.
They're just trying to find new customers,
right?
Yeah, they've done all they can with their existing.
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's another question. I mean, you kind of introduced the term, sort of high end, but I wonder if that's a mispresentation of what's going on here. Because when I think of Trader Joe's, I do not think of high end. I actually think of like curated, unique things that are pretty affordable. And the quality is decent, but not like bespoke,
Sure.
So it feels to me more like this could be, and I read the article, they talked a little bit about like trying all these different things and experimenting, and that felt so Trader Joe's. I mean, Trader Joe's is a machine. I mean, pretty diabolical too, if you really dig into it, in terms of how they will steal small business ideas and then brand them their own, even naming them very similarly. I mean, I don't know if you've seen any reporting on that, but that is wicked stuff that they do to entrepreneurs. And so I could see Walmart looking at that and going, that's pretty evil and effective. We could do that too. So, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think that's honestly, I'd give more credence to that's the motivation. They're looking at Trader Joe's and going, holy crap, that brand is growing like crazy. There's no competition for them. If you think about like if you were to draw like an XY chart of grocery experiences, Trader Joe's is in its own world. There's nothing comparable to it. I think they're going after them. I don't think they're coming after Whole Foods. I really, and that play actually makes a lot more sense to me. I think you could move a Trader Joe's shopper to Walmart way easier than you could I don't even want to use Whole Foods as an example anymore. I feel like Whole Foods is this weird place now, but like a Zupan, we have these in Portland, they're Zupans, or they're these like really fancy, bespoke, expensive as heck stores. I think they're going after Trader Joe's. I think that's really the piece that's not being talked about.
I think you make a good point. In that story, it was a very good story in the Wall Street Journal, by the way. They talked about sending people around the world looking for flavors and textures and formats. And they were saying, it sounds like a lot of fun, but these people were eating 8 meals a day, trying to discover, something special. And I think it's probably fits into that Trader Joe's mode that you're suggesting, but they want to they're looking for all this, and then they want to make it themselves and sell it under their own flag.
See, okay. First, next time, have your friends at the Wall Street Journal call me first, because I could have given that insight. But second, if you think about those folks that the Journal is interviewing, they have been coached hard on what to say. And that narrative that they just shared right there, that is straight out of Trader Joe's. We explore the world. We look everywhere for rare finds and unique things, and then we make them our own. That's Trader Joe's.
But not too unique. They found some things like jarred pasta sauce with cubed zucchini was a step too far for their customers.
Yeah, that's now that'll be the funny part. It's like how TJs can they go and still have their existing? That's the other thing too. Are they trying to sell to their existing customers, or are they actually trying to pull market share?
They're trying to pull market share.
I think they know they're trying to pull market share. Absolutely, and I mean, hats off to them. I this is another piece back to the whole digital marketing. When you go at that idea of trench warfare, you are like fighting for customers your existing customers are fighting for. That is often a function of the thing you are selling is similar to lots of other people. And one path to escape that is to create something new, right? Is to make a new offering or to repackage your existing offering in a different way that can potentially get new customers. This is very much out of blue ocean strategy. So, in the large corporate space, it's really hard to find true innovation outside of a few companies. So what you tend to see is the Me Tooing, where they look at another market and go, you know what, we can take market share from those guys. We know what size of the market. They've done the analysis. They've secret shopped. They've hired ex-TJ's employees and, got all kinds of information. I promise you that's happened. And so the large corporate players, they're these sharks swimming around the ocean. They generally don't create something new that hasn't been done before. They tend to emulate and copy, but then what they look for are things that have not been copied a lot. And so this is a good example of that. Now, for a small business, the opportunity is usually not to copy somebody else that's not as copied as much, but it's actually to create something totally new. And I think that's the most undervalued potential in the small business space within the kind of marketing realm. Going back to Devin at Solid Form, what did he create that was new? It was a community of people who cared about workforce, right? He became an evangelist for that. He put a conference together on that, right? It's like he made something new that was worth paying attention to.
But, Shawn, I think that's such a great point, because when people think about making something new, if you talk about that, they assume you're talking about a product.
Right.
And that's not the case here. It wasn't a new product. It wasn't a new offering. It wasn't a new service. It was adjacent, as you put it, I think.
Yeah, I like to say, and actually this is just a thing we put on our website as like a value proposition. I'm like, what we do? We help people market in a new way. And Devin is marketing in a new way. He's putting things out there in a new way. But back to Costco, right? Treating your employees well, that's not a product, but it's a new way of approaching workforce. It shouldn't be. I mean, but in the large corporate space, it's kind of a novel thing, right? So this new way, I would say, way of working or a way of doing something to open your mind to, it isn't just a product, although it can be, right? Membership was a new product for Costco, but they also had other new things that weren't products, to your point, like customer experience, returnability, employee experience, free samples, so like lots of really interesting things. And
cheap
all of that, cheap hot dogs, right? So you put all that together and that's a brand. And I think of that as really the opportunity for small businesses to think about.
Shawn, I had a couple other things that I wanted to discuss with you, but once we get going, I just can't stop asking questions, and I think we've used up our time. Thank you for taking the time this morning. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Lauren. They were great questions. Thanks for the opportunity.
Shawn Busse is CEO of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy. This episode was brought to you by The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses use an open book management system to help build healthier companies. You can learn more at greatgame.com. Have a great week, everybody.